I am Kate Rufener, and I play Persephone Colossi. And this is Stephen Kerr, and he plays the inimitable, incredibly difficult, horribly written Senator D. Mycroft Daniels. And I am thrilled to be here with Stephen because one of the things that we wanted to set up is to humanize Stephen a little bit after we dehumanize this horrible character throughout this season. So this is a discussion where in the first place I get to say, Stephen and I have been working together for something like 10 years now. I think was Tale of Two Cities our first show together?
It was, yeah,
I think it was. So 10
10
years.
years ago.
Wow.
So
This is
just
a
a little over 10 years ago, we started rehearsals for that.
whirlwind of a decade, right? And since then, we have done multiple productions of A Christmas Carol, Stephen in multiple roles, me in the same role.
Mhm.
And every single time I get to work with Stephen, it is a brilliant opportunity to grow and learn. And that's why when he said yes to playing Mycroft, I was thrilled. I knew that it would be a challenge working across from him because he brings his A game to everything. But I also knew that it would be so exciting to see his interpretation of this character because Stephen humanizes every. So the first thing that I just wanted to ask you about, Stephen, is the script. You mentioned that you had a personal reaction to today's episode. I am referring, of course, to 206A, and this is the one labeled Just Friends. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but we did set this relationship with Percy and Mycroft up so that there are 3 episodes of love bombing, 3 episodes of devaluing, and 3 episodes of discard. So let's talk a little bit about the script. What were some of your thoughts when you first got this specific script? When you first looked at it and read through it and everything, what were some of the things that you were thinking?
Initially, what really hit me, Kate, was that this really hit home for me in my own personal life.
Yeah.
As you and I talked about many times, this whole experience was something that I was very familiar with. In Without going into a lot of detail,
Yeah.
something that I had personally witnessed for a long time,
Yeah.
and and uh, so it was something that I was very aware of, and was very something that was very emotional for me.
Mhm.
To As I read through the script, and as I began to think about the character and think about how I would portray the character.
Mhm.
The Mycroft is really an evil person,
Yeah.
and he uses his control and manipulation and all of the different uh, gaslighting and other techniques. Those things are real, and
Yeah.
I witnessed them myself
Mm.
for at least probably 2 decades,
Oh, wow.
and in personal experience. And so to actually uh, to actually find a script that was so similar in many respects to
Mhm.
what I had experienced in my own life um, was hard, and
Mhm.
yet I knew that I was familiar with a lot of these things,
Mhm.
and so I knew that I knew that I could draw upon um, these experiences and bring that to the table
Yeah.
as I
As you have.
started to kind of take on this character, this evil person,
Mhm.
and try and bring that to light into the character that.
One of the things that I have kept an ear out for, I represent the public face of the Empowering Tools Coalition, and this is a group of experts and psychologists who, for one reason or another, have chosen to remain anonymous in their participation. Some because they're running shelters in places where shelters aren't necessarily legal, and some because of their work, with rescuing people from these situations. So as I chatted with them and we looked at the voices for everything, and I sent them some of the first episodes of you recording this. One of the things that they said was, he just seems to understand that there's a certain cadence to a narcissistic personality. That one of the coalition members said, it's sort of like, when you hear, she said, when you listen to like old tapes of some of the German commandants during Nazi Germany, that you can hear them all starting to sound very similar. They have a very similar delivery and everything. And what's fascinating about Mycroft is that you brought that to the table. That's not anywhere in the stage direction. You just sort of did that. The first time we read through, I remember sort of being blown away myself by that. How did he know to do that? So is that something that you've experienced, or is that something that, how did that come to you?
And with this character, I wanted it to be, I started to think of what would this character sound like, and so I started to play around with different voices, and it was just one of those things where it really didn't happen that I landed on the voice until we started playing with it in the rehearsal. When we did our original rehearsals. So
yeah,
I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to try from reading before we had our rehearsals. But it wasn't until we were actually in rehearsal that it was like, this feels good and this feels like something that I should kind of play with and stick with.
Yeah.
It really was something that kind of was through experimentation, really, and feeling like this sounds and feels right. And then it was like just trying to remember. It really was through experimentation. Almost a year ago that we started the recording, the rehearsal process, right?
Yeah, the rehearsal process was a year ago, 4 weeks from now. So yeah.
So
that's weird.
Anyway, it was through experimentation, really.
Yeah. Wow. And those read-throughs too, one of the things I want to point out is that we would read something through and then it would be 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks sometimes before, you would come back to the character. So it wasn't like we would read through and then the next day you'd read through another thing. This is like read through and then it's 3 weeks and then you're reading through something else. And so that got kind of weird, So coming back to that voice would be kind of, difficult over time. But every time when you would find that, the one word that I always caught that I thought was really interesting was victims. And this was something that one of our listeners pointed out today. She had listened to the Senate inquiry, the introduction, or the inquiry begins. So I named these and I don't even remember the names. So it's 204, episode 204, the inquiry start. And she just noticed that, Mycroft says victims like, I don't know, 11 times in that episode, like in that big long speech. He says it a lot. And so she said that what was really interesting was, here's this thing that, you say victims, and then here in today's episode, you have cause to say it twice. And both times you say it exactly the same way. Oh, wow. And she was like, that's, it gave me the chills every time. And I was like, yeah, I credit that to, Stephen's understanding of like self-importance, that this whole narcissistic jumble is about that feeling of self-importance, and that Mycroft, just lives for that recognition. So, okay, I wanted to ask you then, as we're chatting about, I wanted to talk a little bit about idealization. The first 2 episodes, people were like, is he supposed to be that creepy even though he's that nice? And the thing that I always want to ask people is, what do you think the correlation between love bombing, idealization, this just overabundance of praise that Mycroft gives Seffi in the beginning, what is the connection between that and gaslighting? because I'm always curious what people's senses are of that. And so as an actor, this is an interesting thing because you have this script and there's some stage direction in it, but there's no real breakdown for you of like, here's exactly how to play gaslighting, So how did you infuse the love bombing, all of that with that gaslighting piece?
I really, it was drawing on personal experience. It was ingrained in me in this relationship, um, what it was like. I witnessed it firsthand. And so I saw it not only in this relationship with my daughter, but also with myself, with my wife. So I was very familiar with it. I had seen it. And I remember feeling to myself many, many times, I'd be like, is this real? Is this real?
Right.
Nobody can be like this.
Yeah.
And be and be that sweet and be that, it just can't be real. And so I remember feeling that way, but then you can get drawn into that. You can get drawn into that and feel like, well, who am I to think that, that this person isn't being sincere and genuine?
Just nice.
They are just being super sweet. At first, that's what I thought it was. And so I remember it. I mean, as I'm talking, I can think about all the different times with this person where that's how I thought it was. Like, no, this person is just this way. And then over time, it's just like, no, it's not. This was the technique that was used to get what he wanted. And in his relationship with us, with my daughter, with multiple relationships. It's so to go back to your point, it was from this personal experience that I had that I was able to kind of look at the character and think, okay, this is how I've seen it done. This is how I'm gonna go ahead and try and show this in the character.
Yeah, I think that's one of the toughest things to portray too, is the inside of that experience of being love bombed. Sort of the challenges that we had as a coalition. How do we write this to demonstrate to the audience not just that this Sephi character is going to go along with this, but why she would continue? I mean, she asks the question in the first episode, how can someone allow this to happen to them? And, his answer is totally classic. Oh, well, they're just weak, and I love that argument from the sake of how many people have made that argument. Well, it's just their personality type. They want to be controlled, or something like all the victim blaming. And the fact that Mycroft pulls that in. And one of the dimensions of that interplay that I feel like you lay the groundwork for a lot of the time is there's, in these first 3 episodes, there's a lot of like praise, pull back. And now, you say something, Sephi, let's involve you in this, and there's even moments where vocally you're doing that. So it's very clear that you've had this experience, firsthand, but also as an actor, there seems to be that willingness to get to that point. I think a lot of actors don't want to get inside the mind of this much evil, There was one time during recording where you said, I need to take a bath. Like, I need to take a step back from this. I cannot do this. That actually was this episode. I don't know if you remember that. I made a little note of it because I was thinking about it and thinking, why this episode? There's these upcoming episodes that get worse. So why do you think this episode was so tricky in that way?
It's probably for the same reason why I was telling you earlier about how this episode affected me today as I listened to it, having had a little bit of separation from the time that we recorded it, a month ago, and listening to it today. It just, I think, I think that it has to do with the whole component around father figure that's mentioned,
Totally.
because as a father, it strikes close to home, really close to home, for me, and knowing the depths that somebody can go to control and manipulate and really abuse someone.
I just want to talk about this thing that just seems so blatant to so many listeners today. And I didn't think it would be that blatant, but so many people pointed it out that I was surprised. This thing where he calls her Persephone while Feeney's in the room. And then he instantly switches to Sephi. Mr. Soleil's gone. And yet he has a memory problem. Yet he forgets. Yet he has this ongoing thing that he can't help but call her Sephi. And is it really so important? All of that. Later, without giving away spoilers, there will be other names that will enter into the mix as well. But I wanted to find out what were some of the things that like that got called out for you, details along the way of Mycroft's manipulation.
Pull from, but I think it's interesting that he has this fascination with Sephi's sexuality. That he's always that he's always bringing that up.
Yeah.
And that there is this fascination with wanting to dig into that, into what that's all about and why, and what can be, why that's so important, and what is he hoping to gain by finding that out. Specific to today's episode. I mean, why is that so important to Mycroft? And it comes up, in other episodes as well, where he's using that information for some purpose. So it's interesting that is that seems to be important for him as like a tool for, to be able to get at Sephi, and get under her skin, or that he sees that as some type of perhaps breaking point that he can get to her. I don't know. When you wrote it, was that part of the reason why that was chosen? I mean, we haven't had this discussion yet, but
we really haven't. So there's a couple of different things. First of all, there are spoilers attached to this, so I don't want to go too far into it. But one thing I think there's something that we do know right now, though, and that is that at the end of last season, it's revealed that Ben either loves Mycroft or is dating Mycroft or keeping the bed warm for him. Like there's something there. So we know that at this point. We are aware that it is most likely that Mycroft is gay, and that there's some level of that going on with him. There's more discussion to be had about that later. And one of the things I will say is that we wanted to be very careful that Percy was never physically attacked by Mycroft, that we just never wanted to deal in that realm. And it wasn't because we don't honor that, or because we don't, see that that's a very real problem, and that many narcissists do veer on the physical attack side. We wanted to show how damaging emotional violence could be.
Right.
And so that's something I have had a couple of people say, if this is headed towards a physical attack, my first question would be, then why would I put that on a podcast? Like that's just really hard to represent that there,
Right.
But the other piece of it, to me, in these first episodes, the thing that I'm seeing is how he's using something that she knows for sure to sort of take her off kilter. and be
Right.
like, you should question this and you should question it and then return to me for answers.
Right.
And so as he's doing it, he's saying, where are the spaces where you can depend on me to tell you how you feel? And I think that is one of the key gaslighting pieces, that she should praise herself based on his timing, his understanding of things, that she should feel about her performance anywhere the way that he's decided, and that she will get awards because he says so. She will not because he says so. She should be concerned about research that she's doing in deadlines because he says so. Like, he is just lowering the control curtain all the way around her. So I think that this is a big one, because if he can get her to question this, not only will this cause problems for her and Feeney in the future, but it will also be something that will cause her to just completely rework her internal experience. So what are your thoughts about it?
It all goes back to control, right?
Yeah.
This is all about him wanting to have control.
Mm-hmm.
And if he feels like that this is the lever that he can pull to gain more control, and another way for her to feel like she needs to be able to go to him
Mm-hmm.
for approval,
Yeah.
by making her feel
Approval.
vulnerable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that he is the one that she needs to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, back to personal experience, that I was aware of was this need to always try and please. The
Yep.
abused always feels like they can try, they want to try and please, they want to try and fix the relationship. It's their job to, well, if I could do this better, then maybe they would change.
Yep. Yep.
It's something that I have done,
Mm-hmm.
and if only I could do something different,
Mm-hmm.
then they won't be that way anymore. They'll be different the next time.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know if there's an element of that in Sephi, where she feels like,
Definitively.
if I just do this, maybe I need to look at things differently. And then, this is Mycroft, and I want to please him. He's so brilliant. He's so smart. He's
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
That she feels about him, because of everything that she knows about him and the prestige of him, that maybe she feels like that she needs to look at things differently and she needs to
Mm-hmm.
please him. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about.
I'm super grateful that you said yes to this, because it has really rounded out the character in a way I couldn't have imagined. And I know the coalition would want me to just express thank you so much for doing right by him. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much, Kate.